Here's the sobering truth. We will all probably experience at least one involuntary job loss in our careers. Some of us, like my guest today, will experience it multiple times. Chris Wilson got laid off 3 times from leading and very profitable IT companies, not for performance issues, not because he wasn't delivering, but because someone in a corner office decided to hit a quarterly earnings target by cutting more staff.
I was laid off 3 times. That is a very uncertain feeling. And that's the thing with corporate America. You can get paid nicely. You're going to have good benefits, but all of that can be taken from you in a matter of seconds. And when you go through that once, it was life-changing for me. I'm not saying that education is not important. I'm saying the opposite. You need that, but that doesn't mean that you have to work for someone for the rest of your life. You can leverage that education into something else. In most cases, you running the business does not mean that you have to even like what it is that you're talking about running. Your job as the business owner is not to be a consumer of the good. I understand that you have passions for things, but it's very rare that your passion is what makes you money. I tell people all the time that even though it's a franchise and there is going to be a significant amount of help, franchises don't run themselves, right? Someone has to hire people. Someone has to make payroll. Someone has to put the capital up. Someone has to see that vision through and run that on a regular basis. I want to talk to folks that are average and find out why they average and what can I do to be above average. So I show my clients how to do that throughout that process. Corporate America can be safer. It's a safer bet. I get all that. But for folks that are really trying to build legacy, they understand that there has to be a measured risk involved. And if you can take a calculated risk, you can have a nice shot at some things. Biggie said more money, more problems, right? But I've never seen problems get solved with less money.
Here's what no one tells you. When you survive those layoffs, you inherit the work of everyone who didn't. Responsibility, same paycheck. And then you get the added bonus of constant anxiety, wondering if you're next. Chris decided to opt out of that system entirely. And today, he runs his own company, Legacy Franchise Ventures. This is a conversation about how, like Chris, you can take back control. So enjoy the episode. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Andre, man, appreciate you.
For everyone who's meeting you for the first time, who are you? What do you do? And why does it matter?
My name is Chris Wilson. I run Legacy Franchise Ventures. We're a full-service franchise consulting firm. So I help people analyze and identify franchise opportunities. I guess my backstory is I was a IT professional for years, got laid off a couple times, decided to use franchising as a tool or a vehicle to create additional streams of income. I've since left the corporate side of IT and I've invested in a couple of different franchises. I'm sure we'll get into some of that today.
Absolutely.
And I run this firm where I help people do the same.
You have your own franchise, multiple businesses. Yeah, you're a consultant. Walk me through a typical day in like Chris's life. I mean, you've got quite a bit going.
Typical day, wake up pretty early, normally 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Then in the beginning of the day, I'm taking care of my to-do list. I spend a significant amount of time on the phone, but I've structured my day so that I can drop the kids off at school, pick the kids up from school, more meetings in the afternoon, checking on KPIs, making sure that everyone has everything that they need, setting up the kids for success, helping them with homework. And then before you know it, it's take it down so that you can do it all over again in the morning.
So you left the corporate world, but you didn't leave working because you're still putting the hours in.
For sure. So I tell people all the time, business ownership, especially on Instagram and TikTok, looks fantastic. You just see people sitting on the beach and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Typically, when you leave and you start your own thing, you are going to work more and harder than you did in corporate America. So let's get that.
It's just where you're putting that toward. The energy is going towards you now, right? Versus corporate. Let's talk about the folks who come, because I'm sure they're coming with just different mindsets about what they're heading towards. Typically, what are they coming from, and what are they trying to go towards when they come to you?
So I think most of my clients are running from the uncertainty of corporate America. So I was laid off 3 times. That is a very uncertain feeling. And the layoffs weren't for, me not doing my job or lack of performance or anything like that. It was simply a numbers game where an executive somewhere decided that they were going to cut X amount of staff on a given day. And I just happened to be on that spreadsheet. Right. And a lot of my clients are having that experience or similar experiences where they're working hard, but they're not getting ahead. They're getting passed up for promotions. Some of them just don't feel that the work that they're putting in is commensurate to the salary that they're taken home. I mean, and that's the thing with corporate America. You can get paid nicely, you're going to have good benefits, but all of that can be taken from you in a matter of seconds.
Right.
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 And so for me, it was my initial plan was to have an additional stream of income so that if that happened, that net got pulled from under me, I still had this other money coming in. Listen, when your wife and family they're counting on you to keep food on the table, keep the mortgage paid, and to keep all the lights on. And so it's hard to do that if you don't have consistent income. So
Yeah.
I wanted to have an additional stream of income. That additional stream of income has turned into multiple streams of income, and it allowed me to leave the corporate side of IT. So, blessings for that. I'm appreciative of that. But that's what most people are running from, that uncertainty. And they're trying to get to a place where they can invest in something that gives them the ability to either keep their job and have an additional stream of income, or create an exit strategy altogether to where they're not dependent on corporate.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, you went through this 3 times where you were affected by it. The other thing that I see is probably even more damaging is this. I've got friends in tech, IT, but also folks on the farmer side. And every year, right about this time, there's this anticipation of, am I going to get laid off? Like year after year is annual. And this has been going on for decades. This didn't just start. This has been going on. And then it's in fields that you are well paid. And most people looking on think, oh man, you've got it made. You've got this going. You're in IT, you're in farming. Things are going great. But the point you just made, it's almost like you're renting space. It's not yours.
Right.
That salary, your salary is not your salary. It's their salary. And they let you borrow it for the period of time. And then when your name comes up, you realize that's not your salary. It's gone.
Listen, I would never wish this on anyone. I hope for anyone listening that you have a long, fantastic career and you never have to go through that. But it is an uneasy feeling, even when you're not affected, seeing people around you get affected. I mean, I worked for a company where they were doing layoffs, forget every year, they were doing them every 3 to 6 months. And you would come into work, and this was BlackBerries at the time. So like, you know how far back this was, but there would be a meeting on your BlackBerry. Everyone would go and they would just say, hey, this is not going to be a good day. We're going to be laying off X amount of people. Go back to your desk, work as hard as you can, and HR will contact everyone who's affected by 2 p.m. And that's a really uneasy feeling, sitting at your desk, wondering if today's going to be your last day, or if, you'll get the chance to continue that career. And, you hear it, a couple buddies, coworkers, things of that nature, they get affected. And so on one hand, you're happy that you weren't affected, but on the other hand, some people's lives just changed drastically in a matter of seconds. And when you go through that once, it was life changing for me.
Yeah. And there's a level of angst because I know I read for you that you were on planes all the time. You're traveling for work. You're putting in the hours. So you're occupied doing all what you could consider to be the right things, right? Moving ahead, committed, dedicated, loyal. But then you're telling me every 3 to 6 months, you've got to prepare for another round of layoffs. How would you balance that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I always tell people that in that environment, your performance does not affect whether you get laid off or not, unfortunately.
Right.
And these layoffs are set up in such a way that they say that age isn't a factor, what level you're on isn't necessarily a factor, how hard you work, what your last performance review, like none of that matters. And so, normally we always think that it's a value-based society where the amount of effort that you put in and the production that you have should normally dictate whether you're able to move on or not.
That's what we learn. That's what we learn coming up, right? That's what we're taught.
Right.
Even my parents told us that.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it's a spreadsheet and these numbers, I've seen sometimes a company will say we have to have a 25% reduction of staff. Not all of those 25% are dead weight. They're just going to simply either outsource that work to sometimes India, especially in the tech world, or another country, or they're going to give the people. Here's the other side of it that we haven't talked about. When you survive, you probably just earned additional responsibilities for the same pay.
I was going to say, ship it to India, maybe some of it. The rest of that's getting shipped to you and the cube next to it.
That's right. And when you see people just got laid off, you can't really complain and say, hey, you're giving me more responsibility. Like, you're happy to keep the status quo, the job or the salary that you've just been getting. So it becomes where you're working harder for less money sometimes, and the company by and large is still making money, right? Like their balance sheet looks
the
good.
profits. You wake up, you watch CNBC, you see the reports, you hear the quarterly, reports, and they're all glowing. But then a conversation comes back to you. It's, hey, we've got to do this. We're struggling. I'm like, we just told the street that things are going great.
Right.
We just told them how much profit we're making. But then your leverage goes down.
Let's put it to family terms. You go out and you buy you and the wife a nice car, and then the kids say, "Hey, I want to go to Chick-fil-A," and you're like, "Oh, we don't have Chick-fil-A money." They're like, "Wait a minute."
You got that brand new Beamer. I mean, is there any Chick-fil-A money there? Absolutely. Absolutely. So you go through this, the stress of anticipating it. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's not. At what point did you start thinking, I got to get my own? Something, a buffer, a safety net, so that I don't have to keep going through this. Was
So
it gradual or it just
for
hit
me,
you?
it was at the very first one. My
Mhm.
very first layoff was in 2007. I wasn't married yet, didn't have kids, so it was
Okay.
less responsibility. But I'll tell you, I hated the way it felt. I did not like the fact that, because I had gone to school and done all the things that our parents told us to do, right? I
Yeah.
got good grades. I made sure that I had a good resume, that someone wanted to hire me when I graduated and things of that nature.
Went
But
into IT, the future. I
that's
mean, you're
right.
set, right?
Right. So here I was thinking, okay, listen, I've done what I'm supposed to do, want to advance my career. And literally, like, I was blindsided, right? And so I told myself that that would be, for my opinion, the last time that I would be blindsided like that. And so that's when I started trying to put something together. Unfortunately for me, the only things that I knew about were like McDonald's and like really big food corporations where you needed $1 million net worth. And I didn't have that yet. So I had to figure out another way.
Okay. So you immediately thought franchises or business, or how'd you
Yeah,
think
so
about
I
it?
immediately thought franchises because I was exposed to franchises at a young age. When I started working in high school, like, I always liked to have my own. I didn't want to depend on my parents for spending money if I wanted to go to the
Yeah, same.
movies or, I was like, no, I want to have my own thing. So I started working at 14, part-time. I worked at Carvel Ice Cream Bakery. Most folks in the
Okay.
Northeast know Carvel.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about that was the gentleman that owned that, he was about 25 or so years old, which to me, when you're 14, I'm like, how does this guy have a business, right? Like, and so I started asking questions, and it turns out that his father was a really rich man. And when his kids turned 25, he would gift them a business. He would basically say, "Hey, listen, you're 25 now, you're off my payroll." And he would typically have them invest in a franchise because of all of the support and the processes that come along with it. And so I thought that this was like, listen, I was 14, but I was like, this is brilliant. So I went home and asked my dad, like, hey, in 10 years, do you plan on buying me a franchise so that I can? Right. So
I
you
think I
know
know.
how, right? So my dad, he did well, but not, as well. He wasn't able to buy me a franchise at 25 years old. So that was in the back of my mind. But again, I always thought that you had to, I looked, this guy he was a millionaire. He had jewelry stores all across the country. He had done well. He had a portfolio of investment, a real estate property all over the place. So, I thought that that's what it needed to get into franchising. So that's where I thought the entry point was. And then we'll talk a little bit more, but like, once I figured out that that wasn't the entry point, then like, sky was the limit from that perspective.
Got you. What's funny about your story is it just made me recall a Chinese family we knew in Philadelphia that came to the country. My uncle was a social worker, and he had to assist them in like mid to early 70s. They didn't have a dime. He had to help them to get all these services. Fast forward in 80, 10 years later, I go to his daughter's wedding. And at that wedding, at one point in time, when it was time to give the gift, everyone had these red pouches
Mm,
with gold. They were tied with gold. They came up and presented it. And I'm like, what is that? It turns out that was money for them to buy a house, open their business. I think they did either a restaurant or a laundromat. Post honeymoon, they had a home and a business. So part of it was the family, but part of it was others around them
community.
paying it forward. And that's what they did for all of them. Similar to your 25 story, they were funding each other into ownership, which is what we're talking about here is, and I don't knock school. I'm all for going to school, getting educated. And what I've changed my mindset around is for what end goal? Because we have focused on getting a job, a good job versus owning a good company.
Right.
And that's something that's got to change.
So I always say, and I'm a, advocate for education, love it. But I always think it has to be purposeful, right? I think in
Yeah.
most cases, education or the way it's set up now, it teaches you how to learn, not necessarily what to learn. And so down the line, when you're trying to convince a bank or some other lending institution, you've got one person with an education and the other person without, then the bank is going to take that into consideration. I'm not saying that education is not important. I'm saying the opposite. You need that, but that doesn't mean that you have to work for someone for the rest of your life. You can leverage that education into something else.
And
So I
also
think
what
we're
we choose
aligned there.
to educate each other on. I know here in Atlanta, I've got some folks that I've met, and they're trying to start something. Your kids go in the afternoon,
Mhm.
and they learn finance, they learn business, they learn, and there's still a parallel to them going to school and getting that education, but also making sure that you get properly educated when you get done.
So just this morning, I received a link from a buddy of mine. He's a business owner as well. And it was I can't remember the athlete, but he was explaining on some podcast how he had trouble making $100 million contract last forever. And in my head, my mind, I'm like, man, that is a financial literacy advertisement if I ever saw one. Because
Yeah.
most folks that we know will never see 100 million cumulatively in their lifetime. And this guy was presented that. Now, of course, I get that there are taxes and fees and all of that stuff. But, if you have trouble making that work, then something's out of line.
And I would say your financial literacy point goes to losing it in taxes and
Right.
fees. So, what was that first franchise that you started?
So this is where it gets funny, right? The first franchise I invested in was called Club Pilates. So it was a Pilates outfit. I'll tell you right up front, I know it's going to be your next question. What did I know about Pilates? I knew nothing.
Well, what did you know about Pilates?
I knew nothing about Pilates, but it was just one of those things, right? So how it happened, just to take a step back, was there was a mentor of mine who happened to be in franchising. I didn't know what he did. All I knew is that he was on the golf course 4 times a week. And so once that layoff happened and I started really starting to figure out what I wanted to do, knew I wanted to do something in franchising. So I called him up and said, "Hey, bud, I need to have a conversation with you. Here's the deal. Here's how much money I have saved up," which wasn't a lot at the time. Here's what I do for work. If at all possible, I'm trying to find something that I can run alongside my career that'll allow me to have an additional stream of income. And these are the transferable skills that I could bring to the table. And so he sat me down and he was like, "Oh man, you're in a great position. Here's why." And he was a franchise consultant, right? And so I didn't even know what a franchise consultant was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what he did. He helped people identify where they were, try to figure out where they wanted to get to, and use franchising as a vehicle to do it. So we sat down, we had a bunch of consultations. And then one day he came to me and said, "Hey, man, I've got something that, might be right up your alley, man. It might be." And so he's a good friend of mine. I know him. And so he tells me, he's like, "Yeah, there's this Pilates studio called Club Pilates." And I'm like, "What?" I thought he was joking, right? Because I knew nothing about Pilates. Now, if he came to me and said, "Oh, it's a boxing gym," or, CrossFit, like that's something I could have more wrapped my head around. But he gave me some really good advice. And I'm glad I listened to him. He said, "Hey, listen, you don't know what it is. And you should not turn it down without at least getting some more information." Right? If you have a conversation with these folks and after some time you decide that it's not for me because, and you're able to quantify why, he's like, "We never have to talk about it again. We can go find something that more meets your needs." And I was like, that sounds like sound advice. Like, why say no? I mean, we've always heard don't judge a book by its cover. Right?
Absolutely.
But here I was ready to turn down an amazing opportunity just because I didn't have enough information about it. So I went through the process, and every time, every meeting, it just checked more boxes. It just checked more boxes. So eventually I had to wrap my head around that the business that I was about to invest in wasn't wrapped up in a nice little bow that I thought it would be. And it turned out to be a life-changing experience. So that was the first one.
And so my assumption is you were not into Pilates. You did not do Pilates at this time.
No.
What did you find though that actually you were doing that was the match?
Yeah.
Because
So
a lot of times, even when I talk to colleagues or friends of mine, they look to match. And this is sometimes where passion and purpose kind of goes down the wrong path because we're looking at the surface of it, like the vehicle of it. And I had this conversation a couple weeks ago. What if it is a yoga place? What if it is a Pilates? It's like, I don't do that. What does that have to do with it? So in your case, What was that?
Yeah. So here's the reality, and I tell people this all the time. The product or service, I won't say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter as much as we think it does. As long as it's not compromising your morals or something that you're like
Right, right,
opposed
right.
to, in most cases, you running the business does not mean that you have to even like what it is that you're talking about running. Right. So, if you run a restaurant, you don't even have to like the food. Like, as long as the market says that that food is good, as long as you can sell it. So that's what you have to wrap your head around. You're going to be running a business. You're going to be hiring people. You're going to be making decisions about how much to spend on marketing, advertising and things of that nature. Your job as the business owner is not to be a consumer of the good. And so for me, what was interesting was it was healthy. And I know that in America, people like to spend money on their bodies to make sure that they feel good so that they can do all of the other things. And so I tell people that, listen, I understand that you have passion for things, but it's very rare that your passion is what makes you money. And so my mindset is go make the money and then you can go do what you want to do when you're off work. And so that's what it was.
The other thing I say too is sometimes we're a little like passion lazy because we quickly assume that the passion is something we do. I play golf, I play soccer, I like watching. So that must be it. Versus it might be, I like organizing things. I like marketing things. I like your real passion is beneath what you think it's about. And so if you just push a little bit more, you'll actually see a broad cross section of vehicles that your passion actually is there and your purpose is there, but you're so busy skimming the surface and not pushing down to what you truly enjoy. You never get to that point where you realize that I like doing this.
Yeah. So here's what's funny, even about that example. This was 2016 that I was doing the research on Club Pilates. And at the time, Club Pilates was the first brand to say, hey, we are going to franchise Pilates. Pilates has been around for decades. Most of the people that did it or that ran those businesses, to your point, were passionate about them, but they would only run them enough to pay their rent, have a little money left over. They didn't have, I don't want to say they didn't have the vision, but they didn't execute on that vision to make it what it is today. And so now this franchise comes in with these systems and processes and says, hey, listen, we're going to take this thing that we know there's a market for, and we're going to do it at scale so that someone who doesn't even have an interest in that particular thing can run that business effectively, scale it, run multiple locations across the country, and turn it into a portfolio of fitness brands. And that's where it got really interesting.
Yeah. Because you know what a lot of us have? This passion, especially if you've been in management leadership, to help people meet their goals. And so if you ground yourself on what your real anchor is, you're helping folks, let's say, reach their goals. And then the other ironic part about it is you probably will end up kind of liking what you're doing, right? The Pilates will become a part of your world. And next thing you know, that tends to be what happens as well.
So it did. So even leading up, when we're in construction and finding real estate and all of that stuff, I'm like, well, listen, I got to be able to sell this membership. So I got to at least, so I started working out more and really getting intentional about what I was eating and stuff like that. And then afterwards, I've got this studio open and need to be able to understand the product. So I'm taking classes with this instructor, taking classes with that instructor to learn it intimately. That was my goal. And then you're like, this is pretty good. I see why people pay money for this. So
yeah.
The other thing was just being able to help. So I had ruptured my Achilles playing basketball a couple years before. And ironically, a lot of the equipment and exercise stuff that we were doing personal training, there were components of that I saw in the Pilates thing. And I was like, wait, so listen, if I had taken this 10 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have ended up on the operating table.
My word. Yeah. That whole cool. That's how I found out about it. People walking out with these abs of steel. And I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, Pilates. I'm like, what? What is that? And they're trying to explain it. I'm like, I don't get it. Pickleball was actually the same. My boy got into pickleball and he's explaining. And I go, until today, I've never heard about this. So, and then you get into these things and you start enjoying it. And again, your core passion is there. So you started your franchise while you were still getting that steady paycheck because you're determined, I'm not going to get caught off guard again. Now, that was after the first. The second, you went back to corporate.
Yeah. So the funny thing is I'm putting this plan in place. And the morning after I closed on my business loan for the Pilates studio, I got laid off for the second time.
You're not ready. You're not ready yet.
Right. So no, I didn't make $1, right? Like I literally had just close the loan, right? But here's the reality, right? Had that layoff happened 12 hours 12 hours prior, I wouldn't have closed the loan. Most times when you get a loan, the last thing they do is verify employment. So I took that as a sign. I was like, oh, this happened. This happened this way for a reason. I'm supposed to be doing this. Like, so now I'm like even more full steam ahead. So now I said, okay, well, I've got to be able to pay this loan. So this is why I still needed the job. And I went back to work. I found another gig pretty quickly after that. And then my intention was keep that second gig for as long as possible, build out this studio to where I can eventually one day replace my salary. And so I thought that I would work corporate America long and hard, and it just didn't happen. So the gentleman that had introduced me to Club Pilates, he told me, so I'm a connector. So if you tell me you're a plumber, all of a sudden I know 5 people that, have an issue. And I'm like, here, put these people together. So he sat me down and he's like, listen, you keep connecting me with these people who need my services and I'm grateful for it, but you could be doing this job. You could be a franchise consultant. You'd be good at it. You have the personality for it. You have the experience with franchising. But I was like, no, I'm still working my corporate job. I still haven't made $1 from Pilates yet. So to me, that story wasn't complete. Right. So I went back to work, got the studio up and running. We started doing fantastic. I'm one of the top performers in the network across the country. And then I want to say maybe 1.5 years or 2 years later, I got laid off again for the third and final time. Now this time.
Yeah. What made this a difference?
Yeah. This time felt way different than the other two, because the first thing you do when you get laid off, at least the first thing I do, you call the wife and say, hey, this was a bad day. This time I'm like, hey, guess what?
This is great. We're scaling now.
Right. And I got off the phone because I was working remote. So I remember they called me and, I was just like, all right, well, if that's what it is, like, okay. And I literally went into the payroll system. I ran some reports and just gave myself a raise because the money was there. I was, had already built the business. I just wasn't taking from the business because I still had the salary coming in from corporate. So that third time, it was it. Yeah.
You didn't even think, well, let me look and see. Were you like, I'm done?
I'm done. And it's funny, as a tech guy, I always had a goal of I worked for some nice companies. I worked for Hitachi. I worked for Oracle. I always wanted to work for Google, and I always wanted to work for Microsoft. Those were the two and about 4 weeks later, a recruiter from Google reached out to me. Hey, are you looking for work? And initially I replied, yeah, and then like after the first interview, I was like, I don't even want this. Like, no disrespect to Google, great company. But by that point, I was just like, no, that's not It
is so interesting. I'll have folks who are looking out maybe 5 years, 3 years, 2 years. And so I'll ask, so what are you going to do after? When you ask them about the job, you get precision. There's the vision, mission. These are tactics. This is what I got to do to grow. When you switch the conversation to what are you going to do? There's this murmur, and then it sounds something like, I'm going to take 6 months off and do something. And I'm not opposed to taking time off and if you need rest. But what I say to them is, instead of saying I'm going to take 6 months off and figure out what I'm going to do, wouldn't it sound a little bit better to say I'm going to take some time off and then start scaling the way I've planned to scale when I was doing this full time?
Yep. Well, that's the thing. We'll do all of this work for our employers, which is good. We'll set up forecasting budgets and all of that stuff. And some of us won't do that in our personal lives for whatever reason. And the transferable skills are there. We've run budgets for other folks. We've run department just for other folks. You could do the same thing for yourself.
Let's talk a little bit about your consulting business. What exactly is that? Because I'm not sure everybody understands a franchise consultant. So friends of mine that have looked into this, they are there scraping internet and doing everything on their own. And this whole concept of a franchise consultant, I said, well, why don't you use a consultant? They're like, what?
Yeah.
Who?
So here's the reality. There are 4,000 brands out there, 4,000 franchise companies out there. And if you wanted to research all 4,000, it's going to take you quite some time.
Yeah.
Franchise consultants do the majority of that legwork for you. And when you pick a good one, they're going to listen intently about what you're looking for and then transfer what they've learned over how long they've been doing it into a short list. So what I do is I sit down with someone, I find out what they were good at, what kind of skills they have, what they want tomorrow to look like. Right? Do you want to work 5 hours a week? Do you want to work 50 hours a week? Do you want to take 6 months vacation to Europe or Africa? What does that look like? And then I find you a short list of brands that'll allow you to meet those goals based on your investment range. Now, could you do it yourself? Absolutely. But I'm going to keep you honest. I'm going to save you time and money during that search. because I've already done a bunch of the legwork. I travel across the country. I'm meeting these companies. I'm getting to know their leadership, and I'm separating the good ones from the bad ones. And so I'm passing off that knowledge to folks that don't have the time to spend the last 7 years like I did researching these brands.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you just touched on a couple things. When you say the research, there's 4,000. How are you able to distill, even from you're a professional at it? I don't know how I do it on my own, but how are you able to make that connection?
Well, so it's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? You don't start off just learning all 4,000. And to this day, I don't know all 4,000, right? But I've got over 1,000 that I've researched, taken good notes on, visited corporate locations, had conversation with these folks. And so I'm able to save you time because you're starting from zero, right? Here's the other thing is, sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees when you're the one who's in the seat and needs to make those decisions. Wouldn't you just rather someone say, hey, these are 5 to 7 brands that meet the criteria exactly of what you said you're looking for? And then of course you have to do your due diligence to find out if those brands are actually a fit for you. But how long would it take you to scour the internet searching best franchise under $150,000? Because that's what people do, right? And you hope that Google comes back with an answer. Typically what happens is whoever spent the most marketing dollars on Google is going to be at the top of the page.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that that's a good fit for you. And so I'm doing this. I'm having conversations with other franchise consultants, and we're sharing best practices about what's good, what's not bad, people's experiences. And so it's not just me matchmaking you with the company. I'm able to say, hey, my client invested in this, 18 months ago. If you would like, here's their phone number. Call them up and see how their experience is going. And so that validation part of franchising is critical. It's one of my favorite parts of franchising. We'll talk some more about that later, but that's essentially that the matchmaking is what saves folks the time and money during that search. And the other thing is just keeping folks honest, right? So when we're looking for ourselves, we do it. Like, let's say we're looking for a car. We know that we need a car that's 30 miles to gallon, but then you might see a nice sports car that is 25.
Yeah. You justify it.
And you'll find a way to justify it. When you have a unbiased person here who's saying, hey, listen, this is what you told me you wanted. Well, when we had our consultation on November 1st, 2025, this is what you said was non-negotiable, unbreakable. Does this truly meet that list, or has your list changed?
Yeah.
Right? And when you get that data and you have someone that's able to keep you honest from that perspective, the experience is a little nicer.
And give me 2 or 3 examples of what you routinely bring to folks that they don't realize they actually need it.
So this is my favorite part of franchising, because we all know McDonald's, we know Chick-fil-A. In fact, I don't work with those brands, because if you want to go to Chick-fil-A, you go right to their website and you know how to fill out that form. I'm bringing you brands that don't have quite the name recognition that some of these bigger brands have. I look for brands that have a tremendous amount of success, maybe not 30,000 locations across the country, but if we can get some success where we can say, hey, a bank has signed off on this and says that these brands are solid, that's something that I'll look for. So I'll bring those brands to you and I'll show you the process. The first step is discovery. Let's get as much information about the opportunity as possible.
Okay.
What is Pilates? How much does it cost? How many people am I going to need to employ? What does the day-to-day look like as a business owner in that field? What are some of the missteps that some folks have made during this process? And then, so we're gathering that data. That's pivotal. The second part is validating. Just because we read it on the internet doesn't mean that it's true. So how do we validate that what we learned in that first stage is accurate? Some of that will be through talking to people who have made the investment, having more in-depth conversations with the franchise company to understand what that looks like, having an attorney review the documents. Like, I have franchise attorneys in my network that I can pair my clients up to. So when I say help shorten that process, these are advocates for you that I've employed or deploy, basically, that can help you do that thing. With funding, I've got banks and lending institutions that specifically lend to franchise candidates. And so helping you just get all the way through that process. The third step is the only one that I can't help with. That's the decision making. So at that point, that's going to be up to you and your family. All right, here are the opportunities. This is the one I really like. Do I actually want to do it? I will never push you, because you have to be the one willing to say yes. I'm going to sign on that dotted line and make that investment.
So you can take them to water, but you
Can't make
can't
them,
help them drink it.
can't make them drink. And I can't run the business for them. I tell people all the time that even though it's a franchise and there is going to be a significant amount of help, franchises don't run themselves, right? Someone has to hire people. Someone has to make payroll. Someone has to put the capital up. Someone has to see that vision through and run that on a regular basis. If the business could run itself, the franchise company wouldn't need you. They would just
Hey, just put them out there.
Let's put them out there. That's right. That's right. So that's part of the process is understanding, okay, this is the opportunity. Here's what I try to do. I try to find out what average costs, right? How much does it take to be average in that network? And then you as a the business owner can decide whether you want to be above average or below average. And in my experience, the only people that want to be average are poor performers. If you go into the business and say, hey, I want to be average, you should probably not go into business.
Yeah, that's a problem. Right? Yeah, because your ability to set your floor and align, frame what you want to do is going to be off.
That's right.
I just had this conversation on the weekend. I said, there's nothing wrong with landing average. Aspiring average and telling your subconscious and everything interconnected throughout you that we're going for average, you just signed a contract to be below average.
That's right. Yeah. So, I want to talk to folks that are average and find out why are they average and what can I do to be above average. So I show my clients how to do that throughout that process.
Those customers that are raving customers, what do they describe you and the experience and why go through this process? When they're telling somebody else, what are they saying?
So I think the first thing they say is that I'm just like not a used car salesman who's just pitching this thing. I've sat in that seat and I understand all of the things that are at play when it comes to making that investment. And I'm sensitive to that. Like, I'm not just saying, hey, spend your life savings on this thing and hope. No. Let's go get some data and let's take a measured approach to investing. Let's connect with your financial advisor. Like all of the people that are in your network that have that sphere of influence, let's talk to those people and make sure that we're all aligned in this and moving forward. So that's the first thing they say is that I have real life experience doing this. The second thing is that my network is super strong. So if I connect you with a franchise attorney or a bank, when I pick up that phone and call them, I'm saying, hey, this is one of my people.
Yeah.
You got to take care of my people above average. It's got to be a certain way because my name is connected to that. The third part of it is just a full understanding of all of the pieces and all of the intricacies that go into it and just helping guide them. No process is perfect and there will be hurdles and hiccups along the way. How do we adjust to that? Who else can we bring in to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible for my clients? The other thing they'll say is that because of the process, I open their eyes up to opportunities that they didn't know existed, which to me is my favorite part of it. Because if I had $1 for every time someone says, hey, I want to own a Chick-fil-A, and I'm not beating up Chick-fil-A, it's a great company. It does.
It used to be McDonald's, right? Everybody wanted McDonald's.
Correct. So, but when you sit down and talk about what is involved in running a Chick-fil-A and having to be in that restaurant 40 hours a week and, having no say about where the restaurant is and then not really owning the business. And so when we start talking about all of that stuff, they say, no, like with the way that is, I don't want a Chick-fil-A, right?
It's another job.
It's another job, right? So what else is out there that might meet my needs? And then we start talking about other industries and things that might make sense for them. And you could just see the light bulb come on and it's like, all right, this is a process. You've done this before and let's do it for me now.
So for me, if you're going for a franchise, having a franchise consultant is an absolute must.
For sure.
Now you've got that name on your chest, legacy. So let's talk about that. Why legacy? What does that mean?
So one of the best things about being a business owner is you can decide who you want to work with, right? Like at work, you have to work with whoever.
Yeah, tell you to work with.
So I'm looking for people that legacy is important to them, right? Like when I started my business, I named all of my businesses after my children because they're going to enjoy the fruits of that labor more than I will. Right? Like, of course the bills are paid, but I'm setting up my kids to where they're going to have opportunities that I did not have growing up. And that is amazing for them. So everything I do, all of the clients that I talk with, all of these matches that I make, it's with the understanding that it's not about my direct client. It's about their kids and their kids' kids. And how can we set up, generations to come? I would love for like my grandkids or my great grandkids to say, hey, we have this because great granddad did some nice things back in the, I guess, what are we? That'll sound crazy in like 100 or something years, right?
Way back then. Back in the 20s, like we used to talk about the roaring 20s.
The roaring 20s, right.
Yeah.
So that's why I named the firm Legacy, because it's for folks that are, listen, like corporate America can be safer. It's a safer bet. I get all that. But for folks that are really trying to build legacy, they understand that there has to be a measured risk involved. And if you can take a calculated risk, you can have a nice shot at some things.
What's that philosophy that drives you that's out in front?
So I think for me, I watched both my parents as they got a little bit older, both get that tap on the shoulder. And so, our parents probably lived in a time where, you work for this company for X amount of years, you get the gold watch and the pension and all of that. Those days are gone. We have to figure out how we're going to supplement our life in the latter stages, right? If we're blessed enough to live that long. And so some of it is just being able to build that portfolio and set that up so that you have something to lean on as the years start to dwindle. If we're honest, we have less days ahead than we do behind. And that's an uncomfortable situation to be in if you're not prepared for it.
Is there anything that's happened in life recently that's given you more of a sense of purpose and the need to be very deliberate and intentional about building legacy?
Yeah, COVID was a big one. COVID was just a crazy time. And I had just gotten laid off about 3 months prior to COVID. So I was out on a limb.
Yeah.
I had just started the consulting firm. I had one Pilates studio up and running, was working on my second one. And that just kind of changed how I thought about things, and it really accelerated what I wanted to do in franchising. It ultimately led me to selling the Pilates studios, having a successful exit there, and then using that capital to reinvest into some other franchise brands. And so I would say that was a big, major turning point in life.
So what I want you to do now is I've got a DeLorean that I take folks around it. And so I want you to hop in with me, and we're going to go down the street a little bit 10 years from now.
Yeah.
How do you envision Chris, legacy? What do you see?
I've invested in the salon suites. I've got one location open, working on the second one. So we rent space to anyone that's not familiar with the salon suite concept. It is a franchise, but we rent space to beauty and wellness professionals. So think barbers, hairstylists, nail techs, nurse practitioner, things of that nature. Anyone that can use on average about 150 square feet. And we provide a beautiful building for them in an upscale environment with all of the resources that they need to run their business. And so my goal 10 years from now, I'll have probably 5 or 10 of these open. Let's go 10.
Yeah.
I'll have 10 of these open.
Up to 10.
Yeah, 10 of these open, still doing franchise consulting, semi-retired, right? Like one of the things I love about franchise consulting is I can do it from anywhere. I can decide how many clients I want to take on at a given time. Hopefully, if my wife decides that she wants to stop working, we can travel the world a little bit more than we are now and just like really have some time. My kids will be in 10 years entering college. So no worries about where those funds are going to come from. All of that is ironed up. And I'll be living in either Florida where I am now, or I always say I'm moving further south, Caribbean, Central America, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's hop in. Let's go back to Chris at 30.
Yeah.
You're now you're in a mentoring situation.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to him?
Do it faster. Like that's one of my, I guess it's a regret that I didn't jump into franchising earlier. Like that is something I just think about where I would be, we'll talk about 10 years from now. Like I'd be there already had I made this investment.
Harder and faster?
Harder and faster. I would say take more risks. I was a little calculated, which is good in some regards, but I think that there was opportunity for me to take more risk. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about some of the opportunities that I missed out on. And I'm just like, man, what would that have looked like?
As a part of that, were you a pretty successful 30-year-old?
Yeah, I think so. Like I was traveling. I did okay, right? Was there more meat on the bone? Absolutely. Right. And so,
but
maybe,
you had the things that you wanted or thought you wanted. Folks look at you, they're like, he's doing well.
Correct. Yeah. Like that.
And the reason I bring it up, I think it's part of the reason why myself, it was hard to jump out and take that risk.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason was because I was so comfortable.
And I think about it all the time. Had I not been laid off, the first time or even the second time, I don't know that I would have ever taken that risk. I would have been comfortable making 6 figures and taking that annual increase and just moving along. And so maybe I'm wishing that the layoffs would have happened earlier.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? I mean, I read all the time, because I do a lot of reading, a lot of research, and just, listen to what different people are thinking and saying. And there is a group of folks who say, one of the most dangerous places from an income standpoint or a lifestyle is to be making 6 figures, low 6 figures, because you're doing so well you are so comfortable, you don't realize just what we're all setting ourselves up for
Yeah. Well, and
until you kind of get there.
the other thing is, depending on your age, a lot of my clients, I forget the term, but it's sort of that crunch. You've got kids, but then your parents are getting older, and so you're
Yeah.
kind of being pulled from both ends, where you're trying to
Oh,
make
the
sure that
sandwich generation.
sandwich generation, right? We're trying to make sure that our parents are good, trying to make sure that we're setting up the kids for success. Oh, I still got to worry about me and do some things for me myself too. And so some of that, like, I mean, listen, I'm from Brooklyn, right? So Biggie said, "More money, more problems," right? But I've
Yeah.
never seen problems get solved with less money.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he didn't get to that verse. And you talk about that generation before. Like my parents, they were educated. They did well. My dad, a job at Merck for 30 some odd years. My mom was an educator. A lot of my aunts, same thing, nurses, educators, and so on. Toward the last 10 years of their lives, 10, 12 years of their lives, they lived with me, which is great, by the way. But the only downside of it is that financially, it wasn't the plan. Financially, it wasn't expected that they would have to,
You
but
had
they
to
did.
pivot. You had to adjust. Yeah.
Now, fortunately, they had sons and daughter-in-law and grandkids who were like, I don't even care if you can afford it. You need to come live with
That's
us.
right. Right.
But that aspect of it is, I think, one of the learnings that we're kind of taking forward with us.
Yeah.
And I hear you talking about it as well. Break that is getting the risk of it is worse for us and moving forward because that gap has widened.
That's right. So one of the things that I'm very grateful for as it relates to my parents is that, I mean, they came to America from Jamaica. And so they weren't able to take some risks that they maybe wanted to take
Right.
because that foundation wasn't there. But one thing that I'm so grateful for is that they didn't like espouse their fears on me. So when I started thinking about this entrepreneurial journey and started talking through what that, like, a lot of family will talk you out of a good opportunity because they're afraid themselves. And one thing I tell my clients is never let anyone with less information than you influence your decision.
Yeah. Oh,
Now, if someone has more information than me, then please, I want to hear your take. But sometimes, like, especially franchising is bad. Well, some franchises are bad. I don't think
yeah.
the whole thing is bad, right? I always tell people, listen, get as much data as you can and talk to people that are smarter than you so that you can make a
Yeah.
informed
Yeah.
decision.
There's a lot of folks who just throw around advice. And the way I look at these things, it's situational, it's ands, it's this either or that everyone likes to line up with. I oftentimes don't listen to that kind of advice because it tells me, and this is what I like about what you do, is until you learn and know and understand me, and you are systematically now doing the research to align things with me, where's your advice coming from?
Right.
And that's number one. If you haven't stopped to ask a set of questions before you throw advice to me,
No,
the odds, unless something clear, right? Like don't step over there's a gator over there. I'll listen to that. But I'm talking about, real advice, life advice, decision advice. Too many folks give advice without asking one question.
there's a science behind this matchmaking process. I have my clients fill out a form called a Zoracle Business Builder, and it's really
Yeah.
like a Myers Briggs, or if you've ever done any of those, like those tests, but it's more so asking you questions about the entrepreneurial side of things. And with that data, I'm able to figure out what's your motivating factor, what skill sets you have. Like, are you a good salesperson? What motivates you? What makes you tick? What cultures would you best succeed in? And so now when I have that data, as I'm looking at these brands, now I'm saying, nah, that one's not going to work because X, Y, or Z, right? But this is
Yeah.
not just, the logo looks good. It's more behind the science approach to it.
Absolutely. All right. So time to leave 30-year-old. We've packed his head full of a lot of stuff. I'm going to predict that he's going to be a successful young man just based on this chat we just had with him. All right. So now we're back to the future, but we're here right now.
Yeah.
And you've got that one person listening to you
Hmm.
right now, going through either a layoff, potential layoff sometime soon, or just looking and just realizing that this is not going to continue. I'm in corporate right now, but or government, it's not going to continue. What would you say to them?
I'll tell them exactly what I tell my clients now. The first thing I tell them is congratulations, because that may have been the blessing that you needed, or the
Mm,
situation that you needed to do whatever you're going to do next. And from the fact that we're even having this conversation means that you're open to some opportunity, and that could be an amazing thing for you.
hey, Chris, I appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate what you do, how you do it, and just sharing your story today about what some might consider failure. The fact that you got laid off 3 times and what that can do to you, what it can do to you psychologically from a motivational standpoint, and for you to take it and to turn it into one of the best things that ever happened to me is a lesson that we can all take and determine in our own situations. How do we take these lemons, like they say, and turn them into lemonade?
That's right.
And so that's what you've done. That's what you're doing. That's what you're forecasting that you're going to continue to do. And what I love about it, what you're doing is helping other folks get there. You talked about your kids and helping them get there, and other family is what I took in as a part of that. Clearly, you're getting there yourself, but for you to get there and to be at the top of the mountain and to be able to point out and say, they're all the families and the generations behind them that I help create ownership, wealth, and a legacy that will truly provide that dream that our parents had for us when they left. You talked about risk taking. I had a guest on the other day that said, you know what the biggest risk that my parents took that I take to chase all the dreams I'm chasing? They left everything they knew their entire lives and picked up and came here because of me. So to your point, they weren't in a position to, start this empire, but they provided that shoulder for us to then launch from and to take it to that next level. And so you helping other families do that as well as your own is a blessing. And I just want to thank you for everything you're doing and continued support. And looking forward to having you back on the show to help as many folks as you can get to where they're trying to get to.